Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have a top 16 breakdown for the Carta Magica in-person regionals in Montreal this previous weekend. It was 449 players with this top 16 cut that we see here today. And real quick before we get started, first, shouts to Carta Magica for running the event, and also they live streamed it as well. It was going concurrently to the one that Brian and I were running in Peoria, so I wasn't able to watch a lot of it, but I do know it does exist as well. So I know day one, part one, and part two, since there was a lunch break, is on their Twitch. I think they're re-uploading the second day onto their YouTube channel, which is also in this page as well. So I'll keep you guys updated if I have more information about it, but there should be some viewable games from this tournament as well. And so just big thanks to Carta Magica for hosting that as well there. So, and also for all this information and everything else. And if you guys need any deck lists for either today's event or today's video, which is the Montreal breakdown, or the Peoria one I did yesterday, it will be on my website here as well. So, and most of the comparisons I'm going to be doing is to the Peoria event, just because I'm a little bit more familiar with how that event went and the deck list and everything else. But I do also want to mention thank you to Carta Magica for providing the leader breakdown too, which is pretty insightful for this meta. So we did have 101 Newgates, 82 Kinemons, 75 Zoros, 34 Laws, 34 Smokers, 18 Doffys, 18 Emporios, 18 Star Deck Kaidos, 17 Star Deck Luffys, 16 Star Deck Kids, 15 Magellans, and then 21 generics from there. So still pretty good diversity, and we've been seeing kind of like Newgate kind of rise and fall in popularity, which I'm kind of happy to see. It was kind of a bummer to see like, oh, Newgate's best deck in format 100%, and I do think he's very, very good for what he is, and but I think more people are kind of adapting to how the playstyle is and how to play around it, so I think that's really cool to see there. And going into the top 16 leaders specifically, we have 5 Zoros, which it was a Zoro mirror match in the finals, 4 Newgates, 3 of them being Straw Hats, and one of them being the Moby Dick version, 2 Trafalgar Laws, 2 Kinemons, 1 Doffy, 1 Smoker, and a Star Deck Eustace Kid, which, again, this was going to be the deck that I was going to play if I was going to be at one of the regionals, was the Kid list, so happy to see it did get a top 16 finish here. So we're going to go over the top placing leader for each one of these leaders, I guess. Top placing player for each leader is probably the better way to say it. Starting off with our first place, so this is Naasir's list right here. And I do also want to mention, and we're going to look at both of them, since it was a Zoro mirror match in the finals, I do want to kind of go over. So Naasir and Anthony for both playing Zoro here. And there are some kind of differences between the two builds, which is a little bit nice to see. This one I would say is more aggressive and value-based. So we have 4 Otamas, 4 Makino Namis, 2 Magras, and Gordons. I think both versions did play Gordons as well, yeah, at 3. I think this card does get a lot of value for what it does, especially since it lines up really well with Vistas and Nico Robbins, and the fact that searchable is really nice too. And you don't feel as bad about playing a 1-drop that's not Otama for the -3 as well, because it's a better -3. And sometimes, like, if you put it on board early, you can do something where you use like a Makino to boost up to a 5k swing, 6k with leader, and then you're able to, after that, use the -1 effect and then use like a Vista to get rid of something too. So really kind of like proactive board control, which is really nice. And then Vista and Nico Robin at 4 Zoros, 4 Newgates, 2 Radical Beams, and 4 Jet Pistol, which is really interesting to see the Radical Beams being a little bit more popular lately. I will say it does kind of stink in the fact that there are a lot of times I'd say like Zoro doesn't stay at is at like 4 life for like the majority of the game, and then you have to just kind of whittle them down from 4 to 0. So Radical Beam can kind of help you on like the super crackback, just to make sure you can one more turn to potentially like use a Newgate or something else. But it is interesting to see those kind of transition to Radical Beams from like the Red Hawks that we saw more in set 1. So this is Naasir's list, and then also here for Anthony. So some differences between these ones as well. Running some choppers, which if we looked at the top 8 version of this list for the Top Cut event, they're running 4 choppers, which is really interesting. Choppers not normally as used in this build. Like usually like the Luffy players for Star Deck Luffy use choppers, but normally not as popular in Zoro. But I do think like it is a really, really good counter for Newgate. If they drop their 9-drop and they attempt to, you don't want them to play a second one the next turn, play a Tony Chopper. They have to make a decision of using 2 Dawn underneath their Newgate, or play another one, right? That is like the one balance in the deck, where this is a 9, so you can't put 2 Dawn underneath it and 1 as well. So I'm happy that's the case. So unless you're Star Deck Luffy, but there's still there. They're still trying, but they're not getting as many good top finishes for you there. And then everything else I think is pretty similar. Usopp is one of your things. I really do like Sanji as like a 2-drop for this, just because you get stuck at like 3 or 4 life so much in this deck because your opponent's clearing board first usually, and then they go into your face trying to limit your resources. But I do think Usopp is pretty good too. You can get just a draw as well and kind of prevent them from doing event cards, which again, if you're playing against Newgate, that's going to happen a lot. So I do like the idea for that there, and it's just a 2K counter. And then also something I didn't mention for Naasir's side. We're not seeing any of the 5-drop Star Luffy, which I think a lot of people traditionally would say, oh man, that's the strongest card in the deck. Why are you not running this? And when I've been playing the Zoro a little bit, this hasn't been like my best, my favorite deck to play right now, but there just be times where I'm like, man, I have like 2 Zoros in hand, 2 Star Deck Luffys. I have no counters, and I don't really have the time to play these cards either, especially since I really want to play my 1s and 2s for their advantage there, and they just kind of end up stuck in my hand a lot of the time too. So I understand like why you would take those out of the deck, and as much as like you really want those, like the getting around the blocker is really tempting a lot of the time. I think it's a good call to say, you know what, they're not needed in this. The fact that they don't have counter is kind of stinky. And 5 costs is a little bit expensive for Zoro throughout most of the game. You just don't have the time for it, unfortunately, most of the time. So I do like this list, and congratulations to Anthony there for their 2nd place finish as well. And then next up, we're going to Josh's top 4 Doffy. So for this event, we only had 1 Doffy in the top 4. In the other event we had in Peoria, we did have 3 in the top 16, which is really interesting to see the difference there. And I would say like of all the builds are kind of different for what we were looking at. The top 4 list in the Peoria one it was radically different to this one, and we'll go over kind of the differences for it. So first off, the big boy Jinbei. I know this is a really divisive card in the fact that he is a little bit hard to get right now. He's very expensive. Maybe that's a better way to say it. He's very, very expensive, especially for what he is. Of something where I don't think I'll also say it outright. He should not be the reason you're not playing the deck. If you don't have this, it's fine. It is a little stinky against some matchups like Zoro and also Trafalgar Law. Like this does help you in those matchups. Other matchups, I don't think he actually impacts as much. But the fact that he is a good piece for the puzzle for the deck is a little unfortunate for it, but I promise you, if you guys want to play Doffy, you can totally play him without Jinbei. I'll say that right there. Also running the 1-drop Don Quixote do Flamingo, which I don't think anyone in the Peoria one was. I've grown to like this guy. I was a little grumble of like, oh, you know what, he's a 1 cost, but he doesn't have counter, which really stinks. And the fact that like you can't consistently like if he's like you only want to use him like once or twice and then you're fine in the game. Like, and Perona is just generally better, but just as another copy of Perona, I think is still worth it for what it is. You only look at top 3 of your deck, which is a little bit less as Perona as well. The Dawn times 1 attacking though, you also have to trash a card from your hand, which really stinks, but place up to one of your opponent's characters with cost of 1 to the bottom of their deck. So that happens actually a lot, though. The fact that this can get rid of stuff like Trafalgar Law specifically, I think this is a really good card to counter that deck because you do kind of lose their resources, and you don't even have to like pressure their leader. So you can have like a 3K attack with this, make bottom deck like a Nami or something, and then after that, you make them. You do have to trash a card from your hand, which stinks, but then you don't even give them a card from attacking to their leader because you're 3K to 5K. So I think that's something impactful there. And also, if you notice this one's not running no love mellows, which I tend to like that in this deck as much as it can kind of stink and deny you cycle at times. Sometimes like if you want to play your Mihawks, like I'm surprised you're not at 4, because the biggest issue with this is that you love your Dracula Mihawks in this deck. You always want to drop him down. However, if you play him down and then you have like a love mellow in hand or something, it's just dead until your next turn a lot of the time. So sometimes you're just putting these timing situations where, do I play a Mihawk or do I defend up with a love mellow? Because I can't do both, and it's just really rough a lot of the time. So you'll see this one has a couple more 2Ks, with including the Mr. 2 Bond Clay. And I like this as more, I would say, tempo-based, of just kind of getting a lot of tempo to your side, being able to drop your Mihawks and be really kind of good on tempo in general. So this is this is Josh's list there, and congratulations for your top 4. And we'll see. I think Doffy's going to be seeing a little bit more play lately, and we'll see if that ends up being the case. So next up, we have Christopher's top 4, Newgate, and this is the Moby Dick version. We did have, in the Perry event, we did have 6 Newgates in the top 16, only 4 in this one. And it's almost like it was, a 3-1 split between 3 Straw Hats and 1 Moby Dick for this one. And for the Perry one, it was a 4-2 split. So interesting to see that. And trust me, like I had a lot of people say, what do you mean Moby Dick hasn't been popular? It hasn't. It has not been the more popular version of this deck in any regard, but it has been the top placing list of the 2 at both of these events lately. So I got 2nd place in our payer event with Tyler on this one, and then top 4 here with Christopher on his build. So comparing the 2 builds, they're a little bit different, but especially like this was a little bit wild. Like you'll see this is a bit of a wild list. The most expensive card in the list is King Du. There's no ace and there's no Newgates, which is really interesting for a build like this. Really, really kind of having a lot of defense power. Specifically, the Radical Beams, the Guard Points, the Red Hawks, and the Jet Pistols on top of the Moby Dick. So, assumedly how this deck would want to work is that you just kind of go wide on your board. Kind of just get a lot of advantage and just be kind of obnoxious with trying to get out of your opponent's cards. The Gum Gum Red Hawk really important too. Like this, the fact that this negates and gets you out of an attack, but also this helps you set up for your next turn because if the biggest issue for this deck is blockers, right? And so if you just have your Red Hawk in hand and they attack with literally anything, including their leader, you can just Red Hawk, get rid of one of their tinier blockers, and then it's like a good 2-for-1 there that your opponent has to play around, which is really cool. So I do like the idea of it. It's a really weird build. This is a really interesting build for the Moby Dick version. Not something I've seen as much as there. The ratios, and again, King Du being the most expensive card in the deck is also just very, very interesting. So again, this is Christopher's list, and congratulations for their finish there. I'm going to have to try this build for it. It seems really, really interesting. Next up, we have the other Newgate. So we're just going to look at the Moby Dick and the Straw Hat version. So this is Luc-Alexandre's build of it here, and it's kind of what we've been expecting, though. I would say, the deck that a lot of people thought would be winning or be the most popular in this tournament in general, which it probably was there, if not close enough on the popularity side. But it's just what we expect. I think this is. I would actually be unsurprised if I've inputted this exact deck list pretty, one for one in a lot of ways, with maybe the only difference being like which 2K Straw Hats you like more. We do have luck there deciding that it's Usopp, Sanji, and Brook. Also interesting that no Makino in this build, which I do think Makino is kind of impactful. Like, even if it's just Nami, it's a thing. And sometimes like you play Otama out with Vista to get some value, and you can still bump up that Otama to get another attack if you need to. So I would say it's interesting to see that there was no Makino, but hey, you got top 8. You got a Cyril Luffy with this deck, so I don't. You know what's going on. You're solid. You're okay with your deck choices. And I think that's pretty clear there, but nothing too silly otherwise. Not doing like the little white beer package with Marco, which was happening again in the Peoria side. I'd say this is a very standard list. Besides the Makino, I think the Makino not being in the deck is the biggest difference I've seen from others. But this is Lux's build, and congratulations there. We've got 4 more lists, including Smoker, the only black list to top either events this weekend, because we only had 1 Smoker as well. This is Terrion Williams' version of it, and some interesting card choices as well. Real quick off the bat, I will say one. I've been really liking the Smoker a lot. I think this is a really good card for the deck, and I would be adding it a little bit more. Just the fact that this can't be KO'd by effects is actually kind of impactful. The fact that if you have to go first with this deck, which sometimes you just have to because you can't win all your dice rolls, this is a really, really good turn 2 play. When attacking, also, if there's a character with a cost of 0 in play, this gets plus 2k power during the battle, and it doesn't have to have a Dawn underneath it, which is actually really, really nice, because otherwise, like, sometimes with the leader itself, like, it's a great effect, but I just don't have the extra Dawn to use it. The fact that this is great in itself, you can pair up it with your leader skill sometimes. If Kuzan's on the board, this is always like a 6k, which is great, and I think that's really, again, like, the fact that this is kind of hard for your opponent to remove is cool, and I do like it there. What else? We've got Kuz on board, Selena's 1 Hina, just another blocker at the high end. I still kind of like Hina as just like a backup play. Again, if you have to go, I think there's a lot of decks that like builds for Smoker that just say, you know what, I'm just going to hard commit to wanting to go second. And I think that's fine when you get to go second, but if you don't, which is not uncommon because I think a lot of other decks like to go second as well, you just feel like you're playing a little bit behind a lot of the time. So I do like to add a couple Hinas, and again, we talked about this 3-drop smoker, just to have, you know what, if I have to go first, to have some backup plans for it. So the fact that this can be like a double block at times is really good. And a 6k blocker for 5 is great in there. Also, Sengoku, this is a pretty rare card. Not a lot of people play this, but just like another version of Kuzan, again, it's a 5. Give it to one of your opponent's characters -4 cost to their cost during their turn. So that can be really nice when paired up with Sakazuki. So obviously we've had like Kuzan to Sakazuki at times, but let's say you're on your odd curve or whatever, you don't have time, you just don't find the Kuzan. Sengoku into Sakazuki the next turn can be very good too. And when you're playing the smoker, that does get the double attack as well. This is really solid for helping you like pair up together to get that double attack in too. Lastly, 3 of the 10-drop Kuzans. I think 3 or 2 is actually the number for it. It really does stink that is the case, but there's just too many matchups where you just will never have the time to play him on 10 because you're just kind of in the defense side and you want to try to get more removal. So I just think like he's just dead in hand in like a good amount of matchups that are going on right now, and it's just a shame. It's just what it is though, but it's just a real shame. I do also say like if you have Sengoku out, and another thing, because this gives -4, yeah. So the fact that Sengoku also can go, if your opponent plays their Edward Newgate, you can attack with this and go in your Kuzan, and that's 4 plus 5 is 9, so you can get rid of your opponent's Newgate, which I think that is impactful. So being able to have 6 copies of cards that can help you get that minus effect, I think helps you there as well. But I think that's going to be it for this one. Again, congrats to Terrion for getting Smoker into the top 16 this weekend, and I know a lot of people are happy to see that as well. So next up, we have Jackson Hoang with Trafalgar Law getting it with top 16, and we did have the Trafalgar Law win our Van Impero with Michael E on the helm of this one. And also, Jackson's not an unknown name in this card game as well, doing very well in our Treasure Cups back in February too. But just, obviously being able to secure his invite as well, which is nice. Which if he didn't already off the webcam ones, which I don't know off the top of my head, but whatever, he's got one now. We know that for realsies. And looking at this list, there's a lot of one-ofs. You'll see this one, a lot of one-ofs. We do have one of the Rush Zoro, only one, which I think a lot of people would be like, what's going on? Only one of the best card in the deck. One of the Star Deck one, which is been like, there's also the one of Tech one that we saw from Michael's list. One of the green Zoros. I actually really like this card. I think I like it too. 2 is really solid for it. But I think it was a 1 Zoro and 1 X-Drake, 1/1 kind of trade there. The Trafalgar Laws are great. 8-drop Eustace Kid. We'll talk about this more when we talk about the Star Deck leader, but man, this card's still really good in a lot of matchups. 2 Radical Beams and only 1 Jet Pistol, the Mad Lad. A lot of people still run this at 4 and kind of going down to 3 and maybe even 2, but 1 is like the lowest I've ever seen in Trafalgar Law, at least in like a top cut. So interesting to see that, and I do kind of agree there's less need for this now, since a lot of decks are more, if you want to do well against the more rush decks, Jet Pistol doesn't really need to stay around as much, so I do get that there. And then just 7 blockers. Michael was saying like he likes having 8 of the 1-drops, and I do agree. It feels really good. There's so many decks that still just kind of get countered by a 1-drop blocker, especially Newgate, which seems really great. Nami, Dadan, Brook, Vista, and just kind of everything else. I don't know. This is, again, a lot of Trafalgar Law players are really personalized with their deck list and their one-ofs, and I think that's one of the coolest thing about this leader. He's very, very difficult to play. Sometimes you just don't see your cards the way you need them, especially if you see all your red cards, you don't see any green cards. Like, you specifically need to see Bonnie, Law, and you'll have to always try to protect your Bonnie by bouncing back to hand with Trafalgar Law, but it's just a really great deck for value, and if you're able to get past like turn 6 or so with value, you're normally winning this with this deck. Like, this is the deck that just gets the most value in the end game, compared to a lot of other things. So, congratulations to Jackson for that finish there. Well, I think we'll definitely see more Trafalgar Law as we get into our last month or 2 of this meta, and we'll have to see how it goes. But again, congratulations to Jackson. And then we do have James here with Kinemon. And we did see 2 Kinemons, I believe it was for top 16, which is on the low side for this leader. Or actually, I think we had a little bit more. How many do we have? We had 2. We had 2 into this. yeah, we've been he's okay. Kinemon is I think here's the thing. We'll go back to this. With the amount of people who are running Kinemon, it's statistically very difficult to not top with him. And they almost didn't. We only got 2 Kinemons out of 82, so not a great conversion rate there for getting this in here. But I do think it is a very good deck in the sense that if you're able to see your curve, which pretty much just means playing Odin as soon as you can, whenever you can, you're usually in a really good spot to pressure down a lot of other decks, which is really great. But this is a more unique build for this guy in a lot of ways. We do have 2 of these 8-drop kids, which I think every green deck have at least 1 copy. At least the ones we're coming today. A lot of the well-placed green decks are at least running 1 copy of this guy. And again, he's just so good. We're talking about him more in the star deck leader, but he's very good for what he is. And we do also have Tony Chopper. I think more and more players are just adding more 2Ks in this deck, even if they're like not on brand, because it's Scratchman, Apu, and Izo 100% because they're searchable off Bonnie and Kozuki. But I think adding 2 or 3 choppers probably just makes sense moving forward. Just having more counter powers. Well, I don't know, not having counter power is like the bane of existence for this deck, so I do like that there. Even though this Tony Chopper is not searchable in this deck at all, which kind of stinks. 1 killer, 2 Trafalgar Laws, which I really do like the Trafalgar Laws in this build, and I think you have to choose between 8 and 7-drop kid. Traditionally, a lot of people choose the 7-drop Star deck one, but I think the 8-drop is great too. And then a single Paradise Waterfall and 1 Punk Gibson, which I don't know what it is with green. I personally don't like event cards, but I think they're solid. When you see them too, it's really hard to, you lose so much tempo in green, where tempo is what green really likes to push, especially like Kinemon, and having to just leave 1 or 2 Dawn open, especially when your opponent just decides to play around it, just always feels really, really bad. So I don't know. Kinemon, I think, is still very solid. I think it's still going to be topping in a little bit, but we'll see how it is. But congratulations to James on their finish here. And then lastly, we have Geoffrey with their Eustace Captain Kid. And the Friday before these events, I dropped a deck list for Eustace Kid as well. I'm not going to say Geoffrey looked at my list, copied my list, but I will say that this is pretty similar to what I would be running at one of these events if I was not doing the commentating for it. So specifically for this build, what I really like about it is that, again, this is such a good card in so many matchups still. I think against Newgate, you're really good. In the worst case, like, it buys you 1 extra turn, which means that because of that, your opponent's just going to have a hard time like being at the life total they want to be, which is really cool. So I do like that. Trafalgar Law gets a lot of value in this deck just because it's a blocker and you can bounce like a Bonnie into a killer, which is great, or like a beige, which is I don't know. I don't feel like people are using a lot of cards, as many cards to get rid of their small blockers besides like red with Vista. So there's just like a lot of matchups, like specifically purple and blue. I think blue really has a hard time against this deck, which is really great to see. I also think like potentially you can have a bad time with it against like Law. Sometimes you can have a tricky time with the 8-drop kid. Not always. They do have ways around it. But for example, like with Jackson's list, when they only play 1 jet pistol, you're pretty good to, if they you are able to establish 2 of your kids here. I also want to mention the Paradise Totsuka. So activate main, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less, and then also on trigger KO up to one of your opponent's rest character with a cost of 3 or less. This is a really interesting ad for the deck. It's not a counter card, but being able for 1 to be able to get the rest on something early, I think is great. Even less like turn 1 or 2, like, you know what, I've got nothing better to do. Let's just do Paradise Totsuka specifically against something like Trafalgar Law when they have just so many good cards that they're trying to play one drops of. This is a really great card for that. So I think it's a good tech for potentially that matchup, which again, it did win regional, so people are probably going to be on Law more often than usual right now. It could be really great, especially it can be really good against like 1-drop Zoro, or like Zoro 1-drops thing. Also no Kiku in this build, which is again what I would be playing. I don't think Kiku works in Kid as much. I think Yamato's is better in Kid generally, especially because it's a 6K, which is a really, like, a 4/6 is great, and you don't want to have like too many cards with no counters in your hand, so that's good. Raizo's great, Tony Chopper, and the only thing is that that I would be missing is that the other Yamato, the 5 cost, I think that's fine. And the other card people have been talking about, and I definitely agree with it as well. When I dropped my video, people were like, why are you not running this X Drake? And I'm like, why am I not running this deck straight? This guy is really, really good for what he is. So a 4-drop, 5k, which is pretty good value-wise, is a Supernova. And then also Dawn times 1 your turn. If this character is rested, your Supernova and Navy-type characters gain plus 1k power, which just means that this becomes a 6k on swing, as long as, or 7k on swing as long as you have a Dawn underneath it, which is great. Your leader becomes a 6k as well, which just means you get to double up if you decide to use its activate main here. And it's just great. It's just like a really good on-tempo play that gets a lot of value throughout the game. So I do like this X-Drake. I think you should probably try to find some room for it in future builds. But it's just, I feel like it just gets a lot of value, which is really cool. So I think that is all I have to say for this one. Again, congratulations to Geoffrey for their finish. I'm really happy to see this deck get a top 16 finish after not doing as well lately. And again, like, I want to say, like, not a lot of people are on this like 6 out of 16 people, 1 got into top 16. That's really good on a conversion rate for something like this. And honestly, I think, like, it sounds really stupid, but I think the only reason that Kinemon's topping more is because more people are playing it. Like, it's 8, so 2 out of 82 is 1 out of 41 compared to 1 out of 16. That's like almost 3 times better for Kid on that conversion rate for this event. So anyways, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. Again, thank you to Carta Magica for running this event, also supplying the deck list and also doing the stream and everything else with it. So make sure to check out that, and that should be it for me. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you all next time.